politics no ensem bebre na ekoso ewom ade bechi MPP ayese ade bechi NDC ayese NDC force we de na ye MPP force omonso de na ye hwan de na ye enunti na the Punch TV aba say Ghana politics ni nyina no de ekoso ewo man Ghana mu nyina no ye de ni nyina e de ebrew ewo eye channel ye so message so be subscribe to your YouTube channel na Facebook like video yi e de amame share na ma afofo enya bi hwe na fa o comment nso bra e wo comment section ho e ma me video bi e koso politics mo nsensem bi e koso sisi aba betodwa mayenko ne yenko kwetie ensem no embra.
It's a respected security expert globally is joining us on Zoom right now, having also been involved in conflict mediation as well. Col.Festus, good morning. Thank you so much for joining us. Hello, Colonel.
Good morning.
Great.
Good morning, and my regards to the co-panelists in the studio.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you for making the time to join us. So now this matter keeps coming up every now and then. The Otumfuo Mediation Committee is going to be re-engaged, but then there's a matter of mistrust that has been identified and the politics of things as well. What is the most potent response to this latest conflict in Bawku?
Okay, thanks a lot. I think the most potent, obviously, is the engagement by Otumfuo. That is the most potent approach to resolving the issue. It is not the presence of the soldiers, which basically is to de-escalate the level of tension. And for some reasons, even the presence of the security forces does not appear to have achieved this objective of bringing down the level of the violence. And one reason could be that in our political culture, we don't talk about process, we don't update on progress. So 3 or so months ago, the president clearly signaled that he was going to request Otumfuo to engage. Shortly after his inauguration, he went to the conflict area, precisely Bawku and Nalerigu, which were very good, gestures. But then in between, you don't hear anything about what exactly that the mediation that Honorable Austin Game is talking about is doing or achieving. So for the people who are aggrieved, who are in conflict, it's like there's no progress, and that the only way out is for them to continue to engage, in violence. The other part is the elephant in the room that the Honorable Afenyo says we should not talk about. The politics. It is a well-known fact that one ethnic group sees one party as its ally, and that any time that party is in power or out of power or whatever it is, they have specific ways of approaching the conflict. Only yesterday, and I believe my colleagues in the studio saw the press conference by the minority. A minority that had been in power for 8 years, 8 good years, could hardly do anything about the conflict, tells the media, indirectly tells Ghanaians that this government must be up to the task in resolving the conflict. The government would only 90 days to its credit. A government which has established a mediation structure. A government whose president or leader has visited the conflict area that the previous government's leader could not do in 8 years. That is the hypocrisy of the political class, which inflames passions and adds more fuel to the conflict. The best that the political class can do is to keep quiet and allow the authority or the authorities to see how best the mediation can work. These are, just about the context of the issue. But there are others. Look, here's a conflict that has been there for decades. To the best of my knowledge, it is recorded in literature from the 1900s, at least 1930, 1931, 1932. The white man recognized this conflict. It's not a new conflict, right? Mm-hmm. But then, during the last administration, I think in February 2023, there was a classic intelligence failure. At least that's what the government told us, that it didn't know, with all the resources that it had, including the software that we had bought for $6 million or whatever dollars from Israel, it didn't know that a rival chief in the form of Alhaji Seydou Abagri was going to be installed. And in the morning when the installation was going to take place, or the enskinment, that was when some attempt was made to fly a helicopter, and then to say that the situation on the ground was not congenial, and therefore the helicopter could not land. It's a classic failure of politics, of authority, or whatever it is. So that was the trigger for this escalation that we are seeing. But then fast forward, I think October 2024, what happened? Again, another classic intelligence failure on the part of the state to have allowed the rival chief, Alhaji Seydou Abagri, to be smuggled into Bawku. Any attempts to support the mediation effort must address these things that I call the triggers or the proximate factors. There cannot be two chiefs anywhere in our jurisdiction, anywhere in our ethnic environments. There is always one chief. So all attempts must be made, whether through law or through tradition, which I believe is what the Otum Force Committee will be doing, among others, to try and normalize this abnormality and get only one chief to be recognized in Bawku.
I see.
Then there is this hue and cry about the IGP's visit. I mean, I don't know. I have not seen the full video. Mm-hmm. What was the purpose of the IGP's visit? Among others, it would be a confidence-building measure for the IGP, head of the police service, to go to the ground, one, boost the morale of the police, mm-hmm. one of whose members had been killed, and assure them that the state or the government was doing everything in its power to ensure that they're able to do their work. That's one. But it was also a signal, like the president visit, to both sides of the conflict, that the state was still engaged. Now, what I'm not very happy about is this carrot that he dangled before the youth, that if you lay down your arms, if that was how he stated it, mm-hmm. I will make sure that some of you are recruited into the police. I think he spoke ahead of time. Even if recruitment is going to be one of the incentives for the guns to go silent, I don't think that was the time that he should have said it. Look, in that environment, the first casualty of the conflict is peace. And then in its wake will be the socio-economic, challenges, mm-hmm. the livelihoods that have disappeared, mm-hmm. even the government employees, government structures and so on, schools, clinics, whatever, all of whom have left. So the first concrete attempt to ensure the youth about the benefits or the dividends of peace will revolve around measures of reactivating the economic livelihoods of the people. And in post-conflict environments, when you do that also with a mechanism to reintegrate or integrate the society.
Right.
So if it is farming, you take Mamprusi youth, you take Kusasi youth, you give them land, you give them seeds, you give them tools, put them together on a piece of land to farm. If it is a market economy, for instance, then you make sure that the stalls and so on are not segregated into Mamprussi market and Kusasi market, but they're all integrated. So all I want to say at this point is that we must be careful that we do not go and make statements that probably we wouldn't be able to fulfill. Because be it as made that it is a carrot, it is also a bad signal. Then the Galamseyers will say, okay, we'll stop Galamsey if you recruit us into the Ghana Armed Forces. That should not be the basis for recruitment. You see, and that was what the minority was exploiting yesterday. Although I didn't agree with them, the IGP never said that even if they are not qualified, he's going to recruit them. He was going to put in proactive measures to ensure that the recruitment was accessible to the youth in the area. That in itself wouldn't mean that indeed. The other reason why I detest the minorities' approach is that 8 years ago, they told us blatantly that they had shared slots among themselves. Whether they were qualified or not, individuals were given slots, and they gave some to the opposition then, that's the NDC, to fill. So I'm saying that
that was not even 8 years ago. In fact,
that they must keep their mouth shut.
Well, that was not 8 years ago. In fact, I think it was during the vetting of the Interior Minister. There was a statement of the sort that was made by Alexander Afenyo,
yeah.
eventually said it was a joke.
Before that, a member of the opposition had, proudly stated in public that he had helped 4,000 or so of his constituents to be recruited into the security services. So the point I'm making is that this political class, and I'm using political class in the context of what the minority leader has been articulating in public, they're a very danger to this democracy. Almost everything that goes wrong in this country is orchestrated by the political class. You see, and if they cannot resolve the issues, they must dissociate themselves from that and keep quiet and let others, neutrals and so on, like the Honorable Austin Game, who can help, or our traditional institutions, to help the government to try and restore order. In the process, we must not inflame passions. But I'm saying that we need to resolve the triggers, the installation of the rival chief. If it is not resolved, it doesn't matter how many youth on both sides or all sides that are recruited into the security services, the conflict will still continue, because traditionally there cannot be two chiefs in any ethnic area, in any form or shape.
We have to find a way forward in dealing with this. And then how about the mistrust as well? Maybe briefly on that one, how should that be addressed?
The mistrust owes to all the things that I have said or talked about. Now, I've had occasion to suggest to somebody, to suggest to the authorities, that the security forces personnel must be rotated. Because even in UN peacekeeping, where the conditions are congenial, we used to serve 6 months, and then we came home. Now it's 1 year, but the conditions are more congenial. The fact of the matter is that the conditions under which at least the troops who are part of the task force, not the units who have been established, the mechanized units, the troops are living in very challenging conditions, and that has not helped morale. So they must be rotated. Again, they may have said one or two things or conducted themselves in one or the other way, which might have antagonized a party to the conflict. So in the interest of peace, you rotate them. They come home to refresh, and others go who are seen to be maybe neutral. Now, I've suggested to a general, one of the former commanders on the ground, and he told me that they were doing it, But in peacekeeping, as a confidence building measure, you establish what we call joint mechanisms. So when we talk about patrols in Bawku, it must not be patrols purely military or purely police and military, excluding the parties. These are patrols that must include the leaders of the parties in that patrol together to build confidence. And there could be many other ways in which this intervention or this mechanism can be used. But the general told me that they were doing that. But again, when I look around, that is not what I see. I don't see an integrated, joint patrol mechanism. It looks simple, but it works.
Okay.
So that could be one way of building trust. Then lastly, this conflict area has not been excluded from the proliferation of small arms and light weapons. To the best of my knowledge, for as long as this conflict has raged, no serious attempt has been made to ensure that weapons and ammunition do not find their way into the Bawku area. On the contrary, we know that weapons and ammunition flow from Accra here to the conflict area. So if we're going to be able to manage the level of the violence, one mechanism will be to find ways and means of ensuring that weapons, which is the fuel and the ammunition, do not find their way into the conflict area. And all of these measures, the mediation plus the peace, I don't even want to call it peacekeeping, because there is no agreement on the ground between the parties that they will cease fire. For us to go and keep the peace. This is more about internal security. And if you want to use UN jargon, it is peace enforcement. To use force to enforce a peace that does not exist. And it comes with several challenges.
Right. And I do thank you so much for your expert analysis of this fluid situation there in Bawku. As we showed you earlier, and kindly stay with us because we're still going to stay the steam on these matters of security. But as I showed you earlier, the Honorable Lady's residence, we're getting information that that's what you see on the screen there. There were some exclusive videos we got earlier. Some persons who are close to her have just given us the notice that in fact, she had to flee for safety, that many did not even know that she was even in Pusiga at the time of this particular incident. So she was in the house and had to flee for her dear life. So the pictures, the videos you're seeing are the bullet-ridden doors leading to her house. The private residence of the Pusiga Member of Parliament. Yes. So this is the information that we have as of this morning. Certainly doesn't look good. Quite concerning indeed. But we're keeping an eye on how things are playing out in the Bawku municipality. So stay with us here on Key Point. We have our team moving every step of the way with the IGP yesterday. We understand he rounded up.
I was saying, and some no and the hono so what to be MPP for no at the end some no more can CPP at the end so and I'm chain NDC for so more abai and a was so the omope and no more a year and answer and no any equity at the buy no message so subscribe to the Point TV at the Amaye share my for be here for comment bra na fe so no dear cost be ano chire wadwene e fa ho e ma yen